Hello, everyone. Thank you to Architecture, Media, Politics, and Society for the opportunity to present my teaching case study at Teaching Beyond the Curriculum. My name is Chugh, and I'm an assistant professor at the School of Interiors at the University of Kentucky College of Design. Today I'll be speaking about a design studio co-taught last year with Justin Lund, assistant professor of product design at the University of Kentucky. Here's a brief outline of what I will be discussing today. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I will be taking you through a brief background, introducing the case study and its framework, its design phases, and finally some concluding observations and student feedback. I'm approaching this work as both an academic and a practitioner, and thus aim to make this talk as accessible to as many audiences as possible. Professional perspectives from the Council for Interior Design Accreditation in 2019 highlight the need for interior design to go beyond disciplinary boundaries to collaborate in new ways. 3 key points specifically highlight these thoughts. 1. Knowledge about other disciplines. Students must be comfortable with multidisciplinary collaboration. And 2. Design should be seen as a means and not just an end. The definition of interior design must be expanded to include systems, processes, and interactions. And finally, thinking about emerging environments and designing for multiple unknowns. There are many unknowns, and designing for adaptability absolutely needs to be stressed. The positionality of interior design as a discipline allows it to transgress professional or definitional boundaries that typically constrain the discipline of architecture. Angie Lee, partner and design director of FX Collaborative, has a really thoughtful take on the subject. She goes on to say, interior design can have a profound effect on people's lives because we as designers are empowered to use a design vocabulary that is traditionally restricted to the architectural community. Rather than a limitation, she suggests that this positionality offers opportunities potentially for transdisciplinary collaboration. Unlike interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary collaboration, with collaborators using separate skill sets to achieve a common goal, transdisciplinary collaboration encourages integration and synthesis and can involve non-academic disciplines as well as community members. So when professionals from different disciplines work with stakeholders and users to approach a problem together, they can draw from multiple fields to better understand these complex problems and develop a broader knowledge base and make more thoughtful and nuanced decisions. To test this hypothesis, my colleague Justin and I co-taught a pair of product design and interior design studios in the spring of 2023 for second-year students at the University of Kentucky College of Design. Although housed in the same college, these two student bodies rarely have opportunities to interact, much less collaborate over an entire semester. We knew that finding the right project was critical to the success of the studio. The client had to include essential elements of both product and interior design, while being open to a broad range of creative outcomes. The Explorium, our community partner for the studio, is a well-loved children's museum located in the heart of downtown Lexington, Kentucky. After a few conversations with the museum leadership and staff, it became clear that the client knew they needed some changes made, but they didn't know what they wanted, what their problems were, or even how to move forward. What they did know was that their attendance was dropping, their exhibits were looking older every year, and that the building had been subject to decades of elementary school field trips, resulting in evident wear and tear. They were considering either improving their existing location or possibly moving out. Where the client saw an indiscernible problem, my colleague and I saw an opportunity to define needs and goals, to engage the many different stakeholders, including museum staff, parents, educators, and most importantly, children themselves, and to give our students the opportunity to participate in a transdisciplinary design process from start to finish. The building is 2 stories with approximately 7,000 square feet per floor. Each floor contained multiple exhibits, and a lot of them were in need of rethinking. Existing plans were not available, so the students were responsible for measuring each floor. In addition to the exhibits, the finishes, lighting, signage, and furnishings were in need of an update. To tackle such a broad set of issues, students had to develop an understanding of the problem holistically, and then select specific areas to prioritize based on their own understanding. Such innovation requires careful consideration of user motivations, the why rather than just the what. As a set of strategies, design moves further up the decision-making process. In conversation with the community partner, we decided to take a multidimensional approach to understanding and solving the problem, including understanding areas outside the familiarity of interior design students, such things like processes, services, interactions, entertainment, communications, and collaboration, aspects of design that are often not really thought about when thinking about physical things and spaces. To organize and facilitate this process, and avoid a kind of free-for-all situation, we developed a framework to engage all of the stakeholders, including both collaborators and the end users of the museum. So why specify a framework at all? Well, we certainly could have improvised all of our interactions and relied on the brilliance of the participants to yield exceptional transdisciplinary results. But why shoot from the hip when there is an incredible amount of useful information to develop and tune a much more intentional process? Both universities and professions have begun to talk about transdisciplinary research and its potential impacts, acknowledging the need for some kind of shared conceptual framework to help collaborate solving complex problems. Successfully collaborating in this manner requires a joint understanding of how to work together and to identify common goals up front. Adam Kubin of Ball State University has developed a framework for transdisciplinary collaboration that demonstrates how defining physical conditions, cultivating attitudes toward the process, and setting shared goals can lead to more productive outcomes and projects. We also acknowledge that design research doesn't need to be a linear process. There are a number of design thinking frameworks that are reflective processes, some more detailed than others. We did not want to identify the solutions from the start, and a framework could thus help keep students on track. It is also important to understand critical perspectives on design thinking. Sometimes the rigor of a sequential approach can detract from more creative problem solving. Natasha Jen, partner at Pentagram, gave a somewhat controversial talk about this subject in 2017. IDEO's 3 Spaces of Innovation was thus selected as a primary framework for the studio, as it wouldn't force the students to follow a prescribed order of operations that could distract from the more intuitive and creative aspects of design. Rather than a set of linear steps, the diagram shows a kind of knot that suggests a somewhat messy continuum. That is the reality of the design process. In the inspiration phase, we ask what the problem, motivation, or opportunity is. In the ideation phase, we ask how these ideas are to be developed and tested. And in the implementation phase, we ask how these ideas live in the real world. To implement this structure, the studios were broken into groups of 4 to 5, each with a mix of product and interior design students. Studio class periods overlapped, allowing time for collaboration while ensuring that students in different programs also received instruction specific to their own discipline. Each group developed a contract to define how they would work together throughout the semester. The semester was organized around the 3 Spaces of Innovation, with a broad variety of activities, interactions, site visits, and external input. The reality is that time is linear, and thus the phases had to be structured according to a schedule. That said, the routine opportunities for client feedback in the bottom row of this table were moments for students to go back and revisit the previous phase. As you can see, as a semester-long studio, this was a very active semester that transcended typical studio parameters. We will now look at how these phases in this process played out. Moving into the inspiration phase, For this phase, students had to consider the life world of the museum to understand what users might want. Life world is a concept from Francis Muller's design ethnography. In it, he discusses how design ethnographers should not attempt to judge or morally overwrite situations with their own values, but instead to meet them with openness and sensitivity. Students engaged with the exhibits firsthand and really played with them to experience how a child might approach them. The phase was really about understanding the problem better, while discovering potential out-of-the-box opportunities. We utilized a variety of strategies to foster curiosity and discovery from multiple angles. This included a range of different activities, but I wanted to highlight one in particular: improvisation exercises. Improv helped loosen students up a little bit to think on the spot, to get comfortable with one another, not to be afraid of bad ideas, and to help develop shared narratives. It was a really unique and potent part of the process that also ties into the concept of social emotional learning, where self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship skills can actually help students better connect across differences like race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, learning needs, and age. Students also developed strategies to gather feedback from children and parents directly. The second assignment was a Leave Behind poster that yielded surprising insights into the mind of many 5-year-olds, including insights derived from sticker polls, drawings, and scribbles. These artifacts were actually left at the museum for parents and children to interact with. All of the posters directly influenced the student design approaches, as they helped narrow ideas down. This exercise was discussed in relation to the concept of positionality in research, or how a researcher can perpetuate certain social hierarchies into the process. As the two images on the right indicate, researchers can often suggest implicit hierarchies along specific lines of race, class, socioeconomic status, and educational attainment. Students were asked to reflect on their own positionality and how it might impact their role as researchers and designers. Working through these feelings allowed students to consider how to be an empathetic designer and researcher, one that can sometimes affect perceptions of that engagement. Here are just a couple of examples of student feedback received. Students also participated in online workshops with real-world professionals including Teague, a brand consultancy that specializes in environments. That workshop focused on the power of narrative, with an exercise to develop an exhibit with both experiential and learning goals. They also got to understand the process of service design by Blue Cross Blue Shield. In this workshop, the students developed journey maps of specific experiences through looking at feelings, pain points, and opportunities. The modality of online learning facilitated a wide variety of engagements that might not have been possible in real-time physical interaction. If the first phase focused on research and understanding the problem and context, the second phase was all about ideation, where students used the information gathered to develop specific narrative-driven experiences. This ideation process was organized around 3 types of exploration: storyboards, physical prototyping, and communicating ideas to stakeholders via pitches. Developing storyboards allowed the student teams to begin to integrate spaces, things, and services around a specific user's experience. The groups started with scrappy, hand-drawn ones that eventually developed into these more specific digital collages. In this example, the students focused on a parent and child's experience through a sequence of exhibits. And in this one, the students looked at a field trip group coming to visit the museum. Alongside the storyboards, we had them begin to explore their particular area of focus using cardboard to make 1-to-1 scale prototypes. This was to think through the actual relationship between the human body and the ergonomic relationships between their areas of focus. It was also to test out real physical principles, as digital environments often do not allow this kind of understanding to develop. Once the prototypes were developed enough, Students tested them with projection, color, and light using photo and video to really start to understand the experiential possibilities. These in turn filtered back into the storyboards. The storyboards were thus a kind of vehicle to iterate through, capturing feedback from the various exercises along the way. And finally, the implementation phase focused on sharing results with the client and the broader community. For the last phase, students developed finished prototypes of their proposals and shared these ideas with the public as a set of individual museum exhibits. Using posters, models, and digital visualizations, students shared their thinking with the broader community. They were particularly effective in combination with the 3D film reels that each student group made of their project, creating an immersive viewing experience. Although I cannot go too in-depth on those films here, please pause the video and type this link into your browser if you would like to see them on YouTube. So let's take a couple minutes to look at some student proposals. In this project, students opted to leave the existing museum as is, but inject new connections between the existing exhibits. The students thus explored shortcut portals or tunnels between exhibits as a kind of fun way to create multiple pathways through the existing exhibits. Each tunnel had its own specific sensory experience. This group observed that museum goers below a certain age in downtown Lexington had limited access to global education and exposure. They thus focused on developing a new exhibit in a vacant space, focusing on traveling the world as a way to provide more global exposure to the community. This group decided to focus on the top floor as they felt it could benefit the most. They kept a number of existing exhibits, but reorganized them in a cohesive and educational outer space theme. It was almost a kind of rebranding effort. And lastly, this group probably took the most complex route, both improving some existing exhibits as well as creating their own, focusing on child development through exploration and play. Their work was really well received by the community, as they really explored a number of new innovative concepts that could refresh the museum experience in novel ways. As a counterpart to the exhibit, the students were also required to create book chapters of each of the projects and then compile them into a kind of studio book that would serve as a touchpoint throughout the event, making the ideas more accessible to the public. This process was a great way for students to think through communicating a narrative of their project in the form of a legible set of pages and really help them develop their talking points for their presentations to the community. 2 copies of this collaborative book were handed to the museum director, who has been using it as a set of strategies. The book has also served as a kind of toolkit for the client, making the ideas more actionable when actually considering how to move forward. This toolkit of strategies has now become a means for the museum to envision changing their space and has actually resulted in real changes, including this new STEM gallery shown on the slide that was developed in collaboration with faculty. It has also led to the museum board carving out actual funding for renovations within the space. The museum director was able to use the book as a tool to convince his board that a lot could be done with this existing space. Some common student observations included appreciating the diversity of programming throughout the semester, as students were excited to come to class and saw the experience as a kind of one-time event or process rather than just a required course or sort of end final product. This is a huge win. And the final review in the form of an exhibit, given that the project was about exhibits, was highly successful as the students could actually enact their learnings and discuss their work with the community. Reflecting on the framework, design thinking can be a non-prescriptive process, provided that it is immersive and goes beyond one's own positionality. Student involvement can set an accessible tone and can help disarm traditionally classist hierarchies attributed to design thinking. But this work cannot be for free, as labor must be compensated, even in the form of class credit. And lastly, the the studio can absolutely benefit from being split into 2 semesters. This is challenging when working with community partners, as they might not have the time to work so closely all year. And repeating the studio with the same client can also be challenging, as this experience likely cannot repeat itself with a different partner. That is why a framework becomes absolutely necessary. And here are some of the works cited. Thank you for your attention. If you're interested in collaborating, you may contact me at my email address listed on the slide.